Hey everyone, welcome to the Slice of Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Joining me today is the CEO of SmartRent, Lucas Haldeman. Lucas, how are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Jared. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. Let's dive right in. First, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into SmartRent.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a founder of and CEO of SmartRent. We started the business about 7 years ago. Really come from the operations side of real estate, sort of a frustrated real estate operator who was looking for technology and couldn't find it. And I spent my whole career, which I think we'll kind of dig into, sort of either in technology for real estate or in real estate and using technology as a key differentiator. So um, I kind of fell into that, but that's sort of where I ended up doing.
And how I know a lot's happened since SmartRent's beginnings, but how has did you just from idea to where you're at today, how has it just continued to evolve? Like, what was the? I know that you had past experiences that kind of led you to want to get this rolling in the first place, but I guess what was the initial? You kind of gave us what was the initial spark? What were the additional sparks along the way up until this point that have given us the product at where it's at today?
Yeah, I think the missing piece when I was on the operations side is there was no one building technology who actually understood what I did in a rental operations business, and they wanted to build these platforms that were actually creating more work than was giving benefit. And so I feel like what we needed, and we've seen this not just with SmartRent, but there's been a lot of other um, real estate operators go into technology, is we needed people who truly understood how real estate businesses work to go develop technology that fits into that instead of trying to force a real estate industry to change the way they do business, which is just it's not going to happen. There's a reason why we do the real estate business the way we do it. That's going to stay the same. And so we needed technologists and entrepreneurs to say, I know what you need, and I'm gonna build it for you.
In the early days, was it common for other organizations out there to try to create maybe a not so great one size fits all type solution? Like you were saying, you needed the people that were actually the operators to come in and then decide to build the technology like yourself. Was there a lot of that going on in the early days where it's like, this is kind of what's out there, take it or leave it?
Yeah, and there was a lot of, yes, for sure. And there was a lot of sort of prepackaged stuff that worked in another industry that says, well, why don't I just put this into rental housing? You know, it says, hey, consumer can buy this in Target, like a Nest thermostat, just put it into rental housing. And then it was like, why isn't that working? And you needed real estate operators to say, here's why that doesn't work for me. You know, like I don't get the benefit, like staying on the vein of smart thermostat. Like I get no benefits as an owner if I put in a thermostat that any resident can log out of and just say, I don't want you to know what my humidity is. And so it took sort of having that nuance of saying, we're not selling to an end consumer. We're selling to an end user who's then going to sell it to their end user, the renter, who's the ultimate consumer. But that's a nuance that creates a need for sort of details and specifications that you don't get unless you're really building it with that in mind.
It's so interesting too. You don't like a lot of people don't realize how much they're truly missing when it's not that specific focus. We see it all the time with like the CRM systems, right? Seems like everyone's trying to push a one size fits all approach to a certain CRM, but once you start getting into specific industries that focus on this is how the CRM is supposed to be structured, it changes everything. So when you
Yeah.
were first building, my question I always like to ask like the people that are building these companies is how do you take that initial feedback? How did you take the early feedback to get to SmartRent to where it's at today?
How did I take the feedback from early customers?
Yeah, sorry, from early customers, but then also like how do you? I've received different answers from everyone,
Mhm.
from your customers, from your internal stakeholders, and those other outside champions that may have not have been customers. It could be advisors. Like you obviously you can't take everything or it becomes overwhelming and it doesn't actually you
Yeah.
ultimately have a vision, right? But how do you decide which pieces to take to actually implement into improving the product?
That's a great question. So I early in my career I was a product manager. I sort of came up through product management on the technology side, and what I found early on is that you actually have to go ask your customer. That's really the only advice I want to take. So I didn't want to hear from advisors. I didn't want to hear from my tech team. I didn't want to even hear from myself. Is to say, let's go sit arm in arm with the customer and live in their shoes and see what the problems are. And so we would be on site. Literally, I'd go sit in a leasing office for a day and say, we need to change this because this is frustrating, the property manager when they want to do this and it's too hard to do that. And so I've just always had this bias towards let's go to the end customer. The one nuance to that is you have to realize they're going to tell you what they want, but that may not actually be what they want. And so you actually have to sort of say, I hear what you're saying, but then that's sort of the art of building a product, is that what you're really saying is you want this to be easier or this to be different or not have to do this step. And so I think it's good to say, you can't just say, tell me exactly what you want, I'll go build it. And that's where, again, I liked being there and observing and sort of just seeing how they're using it and making my own intuition of this is what we should change. But I've always liked doing that. I've always thought that's a really good way to develop a product. I think a lot of times we have these incredibly smart people coming out of really great schools, but they're not actually thinking about how do I go solve this customer's problem, and just do that.
There's not enough asking of questions. There's more. I like actually now using, whenever I'm on sales calls or anything, right? The AI transcription services, because it actually tells me,
Yeah.
Was I talking? I mean, we've had this before, right? But like, was I talking longer than I was asking questions and things like that?
Right.
And it's super helpful now to see that. And I feel like it's just human nature to not be as comfortable asking lots of questions, but that's the only way you get to like the root problem, right? That you actually should go out and solve.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree. I love that too. We actually use a tool. Here's a free plug for Gong, but we use a tool called Gong, and it's amazing the analytics we get and the AI and the transcription, the recording the calls, the data you can get from that. And I use it for myself. Like I go back and look, how did I do? And I think it's a great point because you feel like, I'll look at a transcript like go, oh my gosh, I was talking way too much. Like I need to ask 10 times more questions and talk 10% of how much I actually talked. So I agree. I think I love those tools as well.
Yeah, it was kind of like the next phase, because I remember, like before the pandemic, most of my like sales call, it was a phone call. I very rarely did a video call, right? And it was then when you started doing the video call, it really opened your eyes to, oh, I can see if they're actually paying attention and interest. Before, you didn't even know, right, on these phone
Yeah.
calls.
No, I know it was. I was the same way. I really didn't do hardly any video calls. I think that's true of most of us. It was out there, and you had Skype, and you had it, but it was sort of more like for if I want to talk to grandma or something. But kids talk to grandma, you can do that, and it wasn't used a lot in business. And now it's so funny. I actually was on an old-fashioned conference call last week where you just dial in, and I was like, "Where's the video link? I can't find the video link." And I was like, "Oh, this is just one of those old-fashioned conference calls." I was like. It was funny though. I will tell you how distracted I was. I was like checking email, looking around the office, like something about being on video with you here and now, like that keeps us engaged and kind of locked in. So, but it is funny how the pandemic really changed that.
Yeah, and then how it's obviously in person is still the most ideal situation, but then this is as close as we're going to get to face right now, right? Versus having the phone
Yeah,
call. I don't know if you remember. I can actually like remember all the lyrics to, there was this like conference call like .com or something, how they would have a waiting song on it. I don't
yeah,
know if you remember one of those. And
yeah. The guy playing guitar.
yeah, he
Yeah,
actually like he got like famous for that one song.
yeah,
But
yep.
how annoying it was to still be in my head. Anyway,
That's funny. Yeah,
what what's when you've been building this business, what do you look for in terms of the leaders that you bring into the company to help execute on the vision?
yeah. I think first of all, I think it's really first and foremost, I prioritize sort of personality fit. Like I'm of the mind of there's a tremendous number of smart people who could do this job, but I'm hyper vigilant about who do we have around the table and is that a good mix of personality? And that's where I always start, which is funny because I can tell you that's not where most people start, but just for me, that's where I just had success. Is like, hey, let's find the right personality, and then I think this is one of the biggest things that you transition to from startup to sort of more mature company. I won't call us mature, but more mature is we go from needing generalists who can do anything, right? As a startup, it's like, hey, you're the billing guy today, and you're writing the website, even though you're a graphic designer, and I'm doing all the sales calls. to really then it's this arc of maturing where we get to bring in actual specialists. And I've been amazed at how that's helped us transform and get to the next level of. And so having someone who says, hey, I'm an operations person. That's what I've done, logistics and operations for 25 years. That's all I do. If I said to that person, hey, go get my bills out tomorrow and help write the website, they're like, hey, that's not what I do. But bringing in these specialists has been an amazing opportunity for us to sort of take the business to the next level. And I'd say on a more less specific to what do we need at SmartRent, but to hiring executives in general. The other thing I always try to prioritize and dig into in interviews is the ability to do critical thinking. Because what I found is a lot of our schooling system and the tests that we give and sort of the way that we're educating, there's been a de-emphasis on critical thinking, and that what we're solving problems that don't have an answer. There's no way to sort of flip to the back of the book and look at the answer key. And so I like personalities who say, hey, this is a puzzle and I'm going to solve it, and I have enough conviction in myself that I believe in what I'm doing. So even though I'm not sure this is the right answer, I'm gonna try for it. So that's the one sort of generic thing that I think an executive team can't have too many critical thinkers.
How how have you continued to like, by the way, kudos on your site and on the brand and everything. It is one of the most like your site is so in depth, like you can truly learn about every facet of your business. And um you know
Thanks.
it is actually with the times in comparison to a lot of other companies out there, right? Where I have very few questions when I go through your website in terms of I'm ready to buy, right?
Yeah.
Um, what like I'm assuming that wasn't always the case, or maybe it was, but like, what is that light switch moment to say like, not like maybe our competitors aren't doing this, a lot of others aren't doing this. We should give the person on our site as much information as possible to help them make these decisions. Like, what went into that decision making?
Well, it's a great point you bring up, because I actually was going through a couple business websites unrelated to our stuff, and I just was like, I don't really understand what this company does. Like I thought I was a relatively competent person and thought I had critical reading skills and could sort of figure it out, but like I don't really understand what you do. And I went to our website at the time, and I was like, tried to not try to take off my all the knowledge I have, and I said, I'm not really sure I would know what we do if I was not deeply involved. And so it was really a conscious effort. Right after that, we hired our first chief marketing officer, also Robin Young, who came in, and she came in and said, we need a much more comprehensive website. And that's one of the things I loved in the interview, is like, yeah, we need to really say it's out there. And so we actually started this 2 years ago. We started this transformation. It's a ton of work. I mean, there's a reason why most websites just stick generic. Like, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of ongoing work, because it changes, right? The products we have, the services we offer change. But I love it, and actually, I've been on sales calls now. I've just kind of been not even using a sales deck, and I know a lot of our salespeople are doing that too. So they just use the website. So that's my gold standard, which is my website should be my sales deck. And so anything I do going forward, I'm now measured. I'm going to use that lens. But I think it'd be cool. I think people should look at that and say, could this actually be a sales deck, my website, or is it just filled with generic buzzwords?
Well, I'd say majority of people no, they can't. But like yours,
Yeah,
and this is where for everyone, anyone that maybe hasn't checked out your website yet, please go check it out if you're listening to this, because you actually have a page for like every single menu item. Not like I click the menu item and it brings me to that anchor in the page
yeah,
for that particular item. It is a whole page dedicated to that item, which is awesome.
yeah.
Um, and you've really created such an in-depth product. Like it's honestly it's incredible. Again, kudos to you and the team.
Thank
And
you.
you have a lot of big names that you've worked with and integrations, right? And um, how like what do you look for? Like how is this space? Um, I guess what's top of mind in your space looking over the next 5 years? Like how do you see this industry evolving?
Well, I think we're on the early wave of sort of a major transformation like we've never seen. And I think, if you even when you go back to when we were first raising money, prop tech wasn't a word. That's something we've all gotten used to now. We're a PropTech company. We talk about PropTech. There's analysts who cover PropTech. When we did our A round, which was led by Bain Capital Ventures, it was in their fintech group because they're like, we don't really know where you sit. Like, you're not really a consumer product, you're not really a finance product, but they're like, you're kind of more financial than consumer, so go to the fintech group. And they were excited to invest, and they were a good backer. But that's not that long ago that we didn't even have dedicated people working on that. So now you've seen a rush of this, and there's been a wave of money coming in, and so there's tons of good prop tech companies. I think what we're going to see now over the next 5 years is consolidation, right? So we don't need 25 great CRMs for rental housing, right? It's like we needed more than the one that came with your property management system, but we don't need 25. And so I think you're going to see that kind of narrow into some best of breed, best in class. But what is exciting to me is I see the owners and the sort of average age of the owner we're working with is coming into line to say, hey, I want to transform my business with technology. Where I think 25 years ago, when I got into multifamily, people did not want to transform their business. They're like, we're good. We don't want computers in every office. We don't need this kind of stuff, and they loved the apartment guide rep would bring them donuts every week, and they'd buy their advertising and would go in the shop. Like, we did real estate one way for a long time, and we now have a group of owners who are wanting to do it differently. And the exciting thing is they now have options to do it differently because of the funding that's come into PropTech. So I think you'll see we're still incredibly underpenetrated on a macro basis in terms of how real estate is using technology. Like, there's still a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, I think property owners now more than ever, to your point, it becomes a competitive advantage too to say,
Yes.
like, what tools am I using? And everyone's more so than ever cognizant of their time, right? Everyone talks about balance. You can't get to balance unless balance is tough when you're in entrepreneurship in general, right? But you can't get to
Yes.
balance if you don't have the best software and tools you're using. It's impossible.
Right.
Um,
No, that's right. And even I think owners are even looking at the retention side of it, which is a lot of not just resident retention of renters staying, but your staff staying, and employee turnover is really a big issue in our industry in multifamily. And we're getting calls, which is kind of cool, from people who say, hey, I'm looking for a job, but I'm only going to go to an owner who uses SmartRent. Like, I'm not going to go back to managing my properties the old way. Like to me, that's like the greatest badge of honor we can wear. Is someone said, hey, I like it so much, I'm only going to work for another owner that does that.
Yeah, and it becomes like a skill for the people that are well versed in your platform, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, they get comfortable with it. They want to take you wherever they end up going after that, which
Right.
becomes also a great sales tool for you when people do end up turnover does
Yeah.
inevitably happen. They go to a new place and then you get a new customer out of it, which
Yeah.
is cool.
Yeah. It's happened, but it's a great thing.
What kind of as we wrap up here, what drives you? Obviously, you've been doing this for a while. What continues to drive you? You've built something special. It continues to grow. Um, I'm sure you're still loving this and having fun doing it. But is there a core driver here still?
Yeah, I mean, the core driver hasn't changed, which is I've always felt like it's a crappy experience to be a renter, and it shouldn't be. It should be as good of an experience as being a homeowner. And so I think for me, that's always been. We started with the smart home because I thought that was sort of the biggest gap. Like, I'd been using as a homeowner, I'd been using this technology for years, and as renters, we were completely locked out from being able to have it. So that was sort of the first way to go. But I think in general, like, improving the lives of renters, that that is really, I think, important to me. And it expresses itself in interesting ways, and I love that, like, protecting an asset against water damage. Most people think, hey, well, that's really important if you're the owner. Well, that's really important if you're a renter, because if water comes down from the third floor into your second floor apartment and destroys all your stuff, that's not a fun experience to live through. And so I love that there's sort of we can create these win-win scenarios where it is good for the owner, and it's beneficial to the owner of the real estate, but it also really the root of it is it's improving the lives of renters. And that's an easier thing to get up than to say, hey, I improved NOI for an apartment owner, but to say, hey, I improved someone's life as a renter, that when I need motivation, that's what I go to.
I love it. Well, Lucas, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation here today. I'm hoping, what I would love to start doing is I've done this on quite a few occasions, but I've put together some cool panels. Would love to include you on a panel, and if there's anyone from your, from your side, your world that you would love to bring in, we can get them involved too. But and maybe we can dig even deeper on some of the things we chatted here today. But really appreciate you sharing some time with us here today and your thoughts, and wishing you all the best of luck continuously.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So let me know. And thanks for the time. It really, really fun to do the show. Thanks, Jared.